Okay. Good morning. Uh, this is it's October 18th. It's a Saturday. Thank you for joining us for the webinar. Today we have Leslie Grant, and I have been learning from her. We just have a chat before we get started. I have been learning from her ever since 2014 when I was in grad school. I really enjoyed all her materials and all her good advice. And I went to her sessions at different conferences. I was so happy. I was so happy when I ran into Leslie Grant at Central State, and finally I have an opportunity to invite her. Thank you, Leslie Grant, for doing this for us. And I think you have more than 25 years or 27 years of teaching experience, right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot. Yeah. Okay, please take it away. I think everybody know you, but
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad you were able to find some time to join us today. And our topic is going to be about authentic resources. And so I intentionally named this session Getting More Mileage Out of Authentic Resources because we don't want to feel that we have to find a different authentic resource for every task we plan in a lesson. We actually can use one really good authentic resource possibly across an entire lesson or maybe even two lessons. And so that's that idea of getting more mileage out of it. So I am Leslie Gran. I was the coordinator of world languages here in Howard County, Maryland. Before that was in the classroom for 27 years. 21 of those years were in middle school. So shout out to the middle school teachers who were in the group. And since then, I've been retired, and my sons tell me I'm the worst example of retired person they've ever seen because I love spending time with colleagues like you. And so, what I've done in my retirement is I've done a lot of work in collecting, curating, and creating resources that can maybe make your life a little bit easier. So, that's been my goal in retirement. So you'll see here on the first slide that those are all the ways you can contact me. So I have my website, which I'll show you in a second. I'm on Blue Sky, X, and Instagram as at Gran4Lang, as in Gran, my last name, for as in foreign, Lang as in language, and also on Pinterest as Gran4Lang. So, our goals for our time this morning are that we're going to enhance our background knowledge about authentic resources and the different task types and text types that we can put into an effective lesson. You're going to gain some strategies for designing lesson sequences where authentic resources are the context. And we're going to analyze some examples of lesson sequences that demonstrate the integration of the communicative modes based on a single authentic resource. So that's what my website looks like. The newest pages on my website are always at the very top of the homepage. So the newest page on my website is Immersion Program Resources. I personally did not supervise an immersion program, but lots of my friends and colleagues do. And so they asked me to put together a page for that. The second to newest page is called AI Resources for World Languages. That's where I'm collecting examples of how language teachers are using AI in their classrooms. So it's not about AI in general, but it's specific to what are some ways we can leverage AI in the work that we do. This is what my Pinterest boards look like. And on Pinterest, I now have over 200 boards. I think it's like 20 some thousand pins. What I've done there is I've collected authentic resources for you under different topics. So, for example, if you're teaching a unit on in the environment, you can go to the environment board, and I have authentic resources of a variety of text types. So, all different types, not just infographics, for example, on that topic. And then you can kind of select from those ideas that I've collected ones that will work for you. I also have pedagogical boards. So you can see there in that snapshot, there's one called Anchor Charts. There's one called learning stations or centers. There's one called classroom management, flexible grouping strategies. So it's not just topical, but it also has kind of pedagogical ideas. Each board has a bunch of resources for each of those. And so here's the important link I'm going to give you a chance to grab right now. This is a link in Google Drive where you'll have access to resources for this webinar. And so it's just a bit.ly link. And then it has auth as in authentic, capital AUTH, res as in resources, capital RES, and then miles, capital MILES. If you go there, you're going to find multiple resources that I'll refer to during the webinar. And I have a little sticky note here. So if there's something I talk about that I realize is not part of the webinar, I will add it to the folder later. So let me pause for a moment so that you can grab that. And if you like, you can just take a screenshot of this slide and then go to it later. Totally up to you how you'd like to do it. Okay, so I always like to start my workshops and sessions with some sort of check-in. And so our check-in this morning is, what are you celebrating today? I am celebrating that you have time on a Saturday to join us for professional learning. So that's my celebration. So I'd love for you to share in the chat something that you're excited about today. And it does not have to do, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with work. If you want to put something personal on there about a game you're going to go to or something like that. Shufen. Yes, I can try to do that while you all are working on something. So I can do that, or if Crystal wants to. She's asking if we can put the link to the folder in the chat. Okay, anybody want to share something they're celebrating today? Thank you, Crystal. I'm excited to learn more from Leslie. Thank you so much. I'm glad you joined us. Anybody else? And I understand some of you are on your phone. Some of you may even be in your cars joining this, and so it's harder to type in the chat, but I'm inviting you to do that if you like. Okay, and I'll keep my eye on it. Let's keep going. So, you may have heard back in, I guess, 2017-ish, there was a chart that came out from ACTFL that they called core practices. And so many of us who are leaders in the profession were using those core practices with our teachers to lead our professional learning. And so that you will notice that the second and third row of this chart, now called guiding principles, are those six core practices. And then at the top of the list are three additional practices that they added that have more to do kind of globally with language learning. So about literacy, why it's beneficial to learn a language, and then the articulated sequences. So obviously, the one we're focusing in on today is that whole idea about using authentic texts. Oh, and G shared, I'm excited to go biking with my daughter today. Awesome. So within the world readiness standards, we know that authentic texts mostly refer to the interpretive mode because I'm going to read something, I'm going to listen to something, I'm going to view something. And so typically that's where we place authentic resources. Although authentic resources can also be the foundation for an interpersonal exchange or also some sort of presentational product or performance. And so let's start out by having a shared definition of what authentic resources are. So, our authentic resources are prepared by and for target language users, not language learners. So, authentic resources are not something that's prepared for learners specifically, but it should be something that real people in the target culture interact with, right? So, often these come from different kinds of parts of the government. So the Ministry of Health might have one, the um, the Ministry of Education in a country might have resources on their websites. And so the idea is that it's real world, right? And so when we talk about authentic resources, I think the most important piece is the last bullet. And the mantra for this is adapt the task, not the text. So, what we mean by that is that we don't want to change the text because as soon as I alter the text in any way, so that means I cross out things or I work on my computer and I put other words over top, or I put a list of words off to the side and define them, I have inauthenticated the resource. So what we want to do instead is think about what can a student do at the proficiency target. So let's say my target is novice high. What can a novice high student do with a piece of text? And then we want to try to keep that anchored in the proficiency target, right? And so obviously a student in a class whose target is intermediate high can do a lot more with this same text than a student who's in level one and your proficiency target might be novice mid, right? And so always anchoring yourself in what is the target for this course and what does it say in terms of what a student can do. So obviously novices can capture words from something, they may capture words they've already learned from it, right? They may create some sort of little, or you may give them some sort of little T chart that they're filling in saying, these are the things they say are good. These are the things that they say aren't so good, right? So healthy, not healthy, good for the environment, not good for the environment. They can do very simple things like that. In terms of being able to do anything deeper with the text, students aren't ready to do that until they're in the intermediate levels, right? And so we just want to make sure we're paying attention to, well, what can students do at their current level? And so, why use these things in our classrooms? Well, first of all, they're real life examples of language used in everyday situations. And so, the whole idea is that students get excited to see things that real kids in other cultures are interacting with, right? And so, it's not something that was just made up for them, but instead, other people are interacting with this text in some way. So, a good example would be like a commercial that's on TV or on streaming. The idea is that other people are looking at it. But we're going to look at it today because there's a lot of opposites in it. And so we're going to look at what did it say about people in different ways. So they're introverts and extroverts. They're happy people and sad people. They're right. And I'm thinking of a Coca-Cola ad right now that has a whole bunch of opposites in it. And so that's how I'm using it for an instructional purpose. It gives you a context for your tasks. It adds interest because it's real. It demonstrates structure in context. Now, this is important that we know that if they are authentic, there are going to be structures in it. So, word order, verb tenses, different kinds of sentence parts, right? That are in the text that are demonstrating it in context. So, it isn't something I've pulled out and made some sentences for that don't really have a meaning, right? That aren't about something they're interested in, but instead, they're embedded within the source itself. It gives information about the target culture, and it is a source of input. So this is a really big piece too. Kids are going to learn new words from interacting with authentic resources. So I'm not the only person that's giving them input, but they're getting input from all of the things we're interacting with. And those would be the different types of media like video, audio, reading that they're interacting with, and they're seeing these expressions over and over again in context. So what I thought we'd do first, and because our group is small, I think we can do this together on one slide. So I'm going to put this link in the chat. So this is going to take you to a Google Slides presentation. And then what we're going to do is, there we go. So check out the chat, and I'm going to go there with you. And I want us just to think about what have been your successes and challenges with using authentic resources in your lessons. So an example can be, and when you go to this link, I'll go there with you, you'll see that there are some, um, sorry, there are some sticky notes on here. And so the idea is, what has been a challenge for you? So I might pull over this sticky note and say, it's difficult to find authentic resources. And so that's a challenge because if I can't find them, how am I going to use them? And we certainly don't have lots and lots of time in our lives to be able to just be looking all the time, right? And so I'm going to put this on the right-hand side because it's a challenge. Okay. And so what I'd like you to do is you can put something in the chat and I'll do the sticky note for you, or you can do your own sticky note. And so just take a moment. We're going to put the successes on the left. Okay. And what I can do is make some, I can make some extra, let's see. I can put some extra sticky notes on here for more people. Okay, it makes it easier to integrate cross-disciplinary content. Good. So things that relate to science, health, well-being, things like that can be great because it also may speak to something they're learning in science class or in social studies class or in, right? So that's a great one. So let me see if I can make that one a little smaller so that it fits better. Some authentic resources are too difficult for beginners. It takes time to prepare and adapt them, right? So to make the tasks that go with them. And students may not understand the cultural references or background information about the resource. So those are all valid challenges. So we'll move you over here, maybe. Okay, what else? So there we go. Anything else you're thinking about? And if you are frustrated with the slide in any way, you're welcome to add to the chat. I just would love your hard to find level appropriate text resources. So often, especially when we're talking about a logographic language like Mandarin, often if you're teaching simplified, they might be in traditional, and then the content might be exactly right, especially for Mandarin. And so I have worked hard to collect lots of things for Mandarin because I know that's something you all have challenges with. And so I'll share some of that in a bit. I love how you also said authentic materials spark their curiosity for learning. What do kids want to know about? They want to know about what kids in other places do, right? Are they on social media? Do they like the same kind of foods? Do they have the same kind of classes? Right? They're very interested in what real life looks like for other kids in the world. And so making sure we make that connection about young people in the target culture and what are the similarities and differences. It could be fashion, like what kids are wearing, right? So it could be almost anything. Okay, so I love this one. Vocabulary beyond the syllabus can sometimes increase the learning burden. So the idea is if it contains too much additional language, that it causes you to need to do a whole lesson on something that you weren't planning on doing. Agreed. And again, let's think about what is the goal of showing kids the resource? Is it that they're going to see words they already know? So if I'm selecting a resource, I want to make sure kids are going to already recognize some words, or otherwise it can be very daunting, right? And they are going to pick up some new words. And so that's a good thing because I don't want to be the only source of input. I want kids to get input from a lot of different places. Okay. Thank you for sharing. And I'll capture this slide. So if you're still writing on it, go right ahead. And I will make sure to uh, put it in the folder later if you want to see what other people wrote. Okay, awesome, awesome. Okay, let's go back to our slide deck. And so on this slide, you see lots of different authentic text types. So just take a look at the word cloud. And it certainly is not all inclusive. There can be other things, but I want us thinking about very simple things. So I was talking to a teacher yesterday who was doing a level one unit on identity. So who am I? You know, I'm this, I'm that, I live here, I like these things, etc. And he's like, where am I supposed to find resources that a level one kid in the very beginning of the year can interact with? And my answer was think simplistically, right? It could be a student's ID card from the target culture, right? It's going to have their name, possibly where they live, or their driver's license, something like that. And so it can be a very simple thing. It doesn't have to be something very complex, like something that has tons and tons of information on it. Same with a map. Let's say that you're doing a school unit. You can bring in a map of a school in the target culture. And does it have the same things our schools have? Does it have a gym? Does it have a cafeteria? And these might be words that you taught during the school unit. School schedules. School schedules just have the names of the courses and the days of the week and the times. Those are authentic resources if we get them from a real place, right? So it's not one I made up, but instead it's one a student actually follows. So what I'd like you to think about on this slide is what are the different authentic text types? So here we go. Memes. Now, memes, there is no way to know if a meme is authentic. So the reason I include memes is that students love memes. They are funny. They usually involve animals, right? And they capture their attention. And so that is one thing I encourage people to use, even though we can't always be sure they are authentic. Charts, maps, and schedules. Things that just have labels on them, right, are authentic text if they're from the target culture. And so you see there on the left, that's a map of downtown Madrid. An actual tourist could use that map as they're walking around. The one on the right is a menu, right? And so again, that would have days of the week, it might have times on it and things like that. So simple things. They don't have to be super complex text. Infographics. Now, infographics are my favorite because they tend to have visuals on them things like graphs and numbers and things like that that help students understand the text. So the one on the left there is obviously about Kobe Bryant, and you can see it has different uh, dates on there for him. And obviously, it talks about his basketball career. The one on the right, I put into this slide deck to show people who are ASL teachers that you too can use authentic resources. Obviously, if it's written, it's going to be in English. But remember, the audio, I'm not sorry, the video that you use can be in the language, right? Because someone can be signing in the video. All right, poetry. And so remember, there are little children's poems that are out there, little rhymes, little things like that that don't have to be super long, but are also part of the culture. So it might be a little rhyme that all little children learn when they're in kindergarten or something like that. Also, we know poetry often rhymes and it usually has repetition in it. And so that's a great thing to access for novices as well. This particular poem on the screen, those of us who are were French teachers, this is a poem by Jacques Prévert that lots of us use because it has a certain past tense repeated over and over in it. So not only is there a story kind of behind the poem, but also it's demonstrating a particular grammar point in context. Short videos and commercials. And so you see the one left on the left there is like a little cartoon. The one on the right is one of the Pixar shorts, and lots of people use them because they have no language. It's just visual. It might have sound, but there's no words. Comic strips. Comic strips are great because they just have a certain amount of text in each box, right? So it's not reading a whole story. They're great because they can show cultural ideas. So, for example, the one on the left in French is about April Fool's Day in France, and they call it Poisson d'Avril, where kids kind of sneak up to each other and they put a paper fish on their back. So that not only has a language value, but it also has a cultural value to talk about the intercultural ideas around April Fool's Day. And then also comics can be used for students to, you can cut up the boxes and put them in different, have kids try to put them in order of the way they think the story was going. Fine art. Please don't forget that pictures are text, right? Text is anything I can listen to, view, or read. I can view art. It doesn't have to have any text on it. And so that's where a great starting point is that if I'm showing kids visuals like fine art or pictures, then I also can dig into, by the way, this is by this artist, so and so. And so we can use it for communicative purposes, but also can dig into the cultural aspects of it. Social media. Now, this is a big one because students love social media, right? They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram. And so, are we looking for social media posts that relate to topics that we're doing in class? This shows students that real people use the language that they're learning. It's not just for the teacher, but it actually is for real life as well. These three happen to be about recycling. Okay, so question. What authentic text types do your students find the most engaging? So what types of text have you shown them that they get really excited about or they're very engaged in? And so please share in the chat with me what text types you've used with your students. Infographics. Hi, Ying. Online shopping. I love it. You can do that with online catalogs. So there's catalogs you can access that are, catalogs, but the digital. They're not things that are printed out. Songs, dances, right? Pictures with words. What else? Social media for sure. Ads, menus. right? Menus often have pictures on them and then list the different dishes that are available. Videos. What else? And as a teacher, when you use these things with students, you're going to be able to tell which ones get them excited and which ones don't, right? And so also we want to build up a confidence level and comfort level that over time, when we show students enough authentic text, when they actually have to read something heavier, like an article, let's say, they can apply what they learned by interacting with the simpler texts before we get to the more complex texts, right? So just like anything, we slowly build up their ability to interact with the text. Commercials, video ads, picture advertisements. That's G. Depends on how I use the authentic materials to interact with them. Definitely is how am I deciding how I'm using them. So you can keep putting ideas in the chat, and I'm going to move on. So, when we're thinking about implementing authentic text, there's two steps. Step one is collect them. So, I'm collecting a bunch of authentic resources for a particular theme I'm teaching. So, I am teaching the theme of food. So, then I'm going to collect a whole bunch of food authentic text. Later, I'm going to decide how I'm going to use them. So, you see, that's step two. And so as I'm collecting authentic text, I have a little infographic I created that helps people think about what should be your thinking points. And so number one, is it authentic? Two, is it accessible? Is it appropriate to their age and proficiency level? Is it the right level of challenge? Does it have lots of visuals in it for novices, right? Can I link that to prior knowledge? There's lots of recent vocabulary we've learned in it. And then is it aligned? Is it leading to the learning target? So if my learning target is I can talk about my favorite foods, are the authentic resources that I'm collecting to use with students during this unit, enabling them to talk about their favorite foods. And so when I think about appealing, you know what your students are interested in. You know, you're currently teaching Generation Z, Generation Alpha students. They're very interested in solving world problems. They're very interested in short things, right? So that's why TikToks are so short. So not super long text. And the idea is that there's usually humor in them or there's something that they're curious about. So that appeals to our students. And so we can think about things like Minecraft. What are the characteristics of a good friend? Kids care about that. The one in the center is in French and it's about bullying. And so that is a topic that kids deal with. Are we using these with our students? And then are they accessible? So are they appropriate for the age that I'm using them for? And then are they aligned? And so the idea is that are they leading students to the proficiency target? So one example I can give you from my Pinterest boards is the back to school authentic resources. And so I'm not going to go there right now, but I'm going to show you some examples of things I collected on the topic of back to school. I collected memes, sale ads. So sale ads, especially if students wear uniforms, right? Or also sale ads for school supplies. Poems. There's lots of little poems out there about going back to school, you know, little poems for children. Commercials. There are ads out there, you know, about sales on school supplies, and they're holding up the different school supplies and saying what they are. Videos, comics, maps, schedules, audio clips, online articles, infographics, supply lists. So here's one you may not have thought of. Students in other countries also get supply lists. You need these things to start the school year. And so not that doesn't just happen here, like how you can find them in Walmart, right? But instead can happen in other countries too. They're interested in knowing what students need. Songs about going back to school, photos of kids going back to school or in school and social media posts. So it's really important that I'm trying to collect as many different text types as possible. I don't want everything I collect to be one thing, one kind of thing, but I want to try to have a lot of different things because some of them I want to use as a warm up. Some of them I might want to use as the basis for an interpersonal exchange, right? And so I need lots of different ones to select from. And so, what I want you to do is think about a unit you might have coming up. And so, I just threw some possible themes up there, like environment, health, technology, etc. And then think about what type of text you would want to collect on those topics. And so that will help in terms of when you're looking through my Pinterest boards or when you're looking out there on your own, or you might have a site you use to find your authentic resources. You have in mind that you want to go beyond just the videos and infographics, for example. We want to kind of widen that text base. And as always, every single thing I use with students, I need to preview. This was true back in the day when we used hard copy things, and it's true today when we're using digital things, is that we need to make sure that they are appropriate to the students. When I curate resources for my Pinterest boards, I try very hard to eliminate things that might have violence in them, drinking, smoking, drugs, these kind of things. But you still need to look at every single thing that you give students and make sure they're appropriate. You know your school community, you know your parents or your students' parents, and what is appropriate to their age and language level. And so the next question might be, well, then how am I putting these things into a lesson plan? So I want you to think about having a stack of cards. So imagine like a deck of cards, and each card has a picture of one of these authentic resources that you've collected. So now I'm going to consider how are they going to work for me? How are they going to function in the tasks that I typically design for my students in a typical lesson? And so what we want to do is find the right fit. And so on this slide, you'll see down in the bottom right are some teachers that I was working with where I had a whole bunch of authentic resources on laminated sheets, and they're on the tabletop, moving them into categories. Like these would be great for teaching vocabulary or reviewing vocabulary. This would be great for teaching kids how to read. This one would be great for a paired activity. This one may, so we start sorting them out, thinking about how they will work for me. And do I have to use every one of them that I collected? No. If it doesn't fit, I don't need to use it, right? And so we're not trying to design our lesson first and then go out on Google and try to find an authentic resource that's perfectly going to match that task. That is not easy to do. It's much easier to have a big pile of things and then decide how I'm using them for different purposes in my classroom. So let's pretend that I have a set of cards that look like this. And just a quick look at this, you can see some social media posts here. You can see some videos. You see poem. You see some memes or just a picture with a quote on top of it. There are some that are just pictures. There's articles. Imagine that this is my deck of cards. And so I'm trying to think about how are you going to work for me in my lessons on this theme. So this one obviously it has to do with the environment and recycling. And so in your folder, you're going to find a chart like this. And I advise you that if you want to play around with this on your own, you can download this chart. I advise you to print it on legal size so it's big enough for you to be able to move things around. And then the idea is, again, imagine I have that stack of cards in my hand. I'm laying them out on the different segments saying, oh, this would be a great speaking task. This would be a great pair or small group task. This would be a great game, right? So I'm kind of sorting them out, thinking about what would be the communicative purpose of using this resource. And so from that list, see that big collage I had of all those different pictures of my resources, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to save these for lesson hooks. So these are just a little cartoon, and there's a picture with the crab and the turtle and the duck. And then there's a did you know that? So really short things, those two there. I'm going to put them in the category called lesson hooks. So what I mean by lesson hooks, is a do now, warm up, whatever your first activity is in your lesson. And then I pulled these two out because these would be great to either introduce or review vocabulary. Because in a recycling unit, I'm going to want to teach paper, cardboard, glass, metal, plastic, things like that. And so you'll notice the one on the left has those exactly there with labels. So they've got a little icon on there. And then the one on the right, I actually could have kids describe what's inside of the recycle bin, what types of things are in there, plastics, metals, etc., glass. I'm going to pull some out for what I call guided instruction. That's where I'm going to lead students through it. So in the case of the one on the top left, that's a video. So I might do it kind of Ed puzzle style, where I show them part of the video, and then we pause, and then I ask some questions, and then we return to the video, show a little bit more, pause, ask some questions. So obviously, I'm working on viewing and comprehension. The one on the right is a little poem about the world and how it's our home. And so I might be using some sort of literacy skill there. So I might be looking for words that I already know, words that I can guess, things like that. And then the one on the bottom center, by the way, if you're a Spanish teacher, there's a cool online magazine called Muy Interesante. And there's also a Muy Interesante Junior, which is easier language because it's for kids. I may be leading them through this article by doing a jigsaw or something. So I'm leading them through a task. And so that's why I set these three aside. I pulled these three out because they all show grammar in context. And so on the left, I don't know if you can see them because they're tiny, but some of these are in the future tense. The one in the on the left is in past tense. The one on the right has command forms in it. And so what I tell people to do is when you collect authentic resources on a topic or a theme, also look at them through grammar glasses. So what is it teaching kids about word order? What is it teaching kids about tenses? What is it teaching kids about adjectives and nouns and things like that, right? And so looking at your materials through another lens and saying, well, actually, I could review or teach this grammar point when I'm using these materials on this topic. Then I have a pile that I call extension. And these are things that I don't really need to use with students, but I think might be interesting for students who want to dig in deeper because they're kind of subtopics that have to do with the environment. So conscious consumerism, um, environmental activism, electronic trash, how we're throwing away a lot of cell phones and things like that. And so that might be something students might want to dig into as an enrichment activity. Then I might be looking for things I can tier. So, tiering is a differentiation strategy where I give students different levels of challenge. So these three items on the screen you see are all about reasons to recycle. But you can see one of them is a lot more simple, like the one in the center, because it has pictures and it has words that are kind of highlighted, right? Then the one on the right might be the next level, kind of a medium um, difficulty level. And the one on the far left might be my higher difficulty level because it has more text. And so again, I can have the kids jigsaw this, have three different groups doing one of these infographics that's on their level, filling in some sort of graphic organizer. And then I have them get together with their groups that might have looked at more than one infographic and shared what they learned from the infographic in terms of reasons you should recycle. So it could be a graphic organizer, things I agree with, things I disagree with, things I already do, things I would like to do in the future. So I'm a big, big believer in creating some sort of very simple graphic organizer chart kind of thing that students can fill in while they're interacting with text. You do not need to make a comprehension guide for every single text kids are interacting with. That's a whole lot of work, especially if all you want them to do after interacting with this text is then get into pairs or small groups and talk about what they learned. So moving it from interpretive to interpersonal. I pulled these two aside because I think I'm going to use those for the performance assessment. So I pulled out a particular article and a particular video that I'm going to put aside and make part of my summative assessment for the unit. I pulled these out as speaking and writing tasks um, basis. So just two little kind of quotes. And then the one on the right, a picture. And then I'm planning on having kids speak or write presentationally about it. Listening and viewing. I also need things for that. Notice the bottom right. That's from a website called Audio Lingua, Lingua. When you go on there, you choose your language, and then you also can choose the topic. So this one happens to be about how Buenos Aires is very polluted. And what's nice about it, it rates the audio by difficulty level, and they use the Common European framework. So this one, you may be able to see it says B1. So A1 is the lowest, right? A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. It tells you it's a male talking, it's an adult, and it's 90 seconds to 120 seconds. And so it really, you can be very judicious in how you select these from that site. And again, it's Audio Lingua, and I'll try to remember to add the a link for that or in our folder. Then I pulled out these pieces because I think I might like to lead a discussion or a debate on um, taking care of the planet using these resources. And then finally, I want to use some of them for parent small group tasks. And on the left here, you'll see there's it's called Instructions for Living on the Earth. And notice that I covered up certain sections of it on the left. And then the one beside it, I covered up other sections. Same with the one on the other infographic on the side. And magically, I just created a information gap activity, right? And so now I've turned it into what do you know about this? And then I learned from my partner what I don't have on my infographic, and then they learn from me what they don't have on their infographic. Anytime I see things in squares, I always think of games. And so when I find a resource like this one on the left, I think about cutting those cards up, creating a card deck from them, and kids are using them to turn over and either categorize or respond to in some way. Same with the little story on the right, kind of like the comics, you can put them back in some sort of order. So anytime I see things like that, I think, oh, I could make that into a manipulative kind of activity where students are dealing with cards of some sort. So now that I've talked a lot, I'm going to give you some time and I'm going to put this link in the chat. So what I've done is I've collected some authentic resources for you just on a particular topic. So they're not all the authentic resources in the world, but I'm going to show you where you're going to go. And so when you click that link, you're going to find a Google Drive folder, and I like to put my Google Drive folders into the list form sometimes, so you might be able to find your language faster, or you can leave it in the icon view. Totally up to you. So if you are a teacher of Arabic, you're going to come down here and open this folder called Moroccan Food. What I want you to do when you look at the resources I put together for you is think about how might you use them in a lesson? Would they be a good lesson hook? Would they be a good game? Would they be a good speaking activity? Just to give you practice on how to look at authentic resources and consider how you might use them in your lessons. And so again, if I teach Chinese, I'm opening up this one. And again, I like looking at the icons so you can see the pictures. If you teach, I know people have referenced Spanish. So if you teach Spanish, you're going to find the environment ones lots of the ones I just shared. So let me give you a few minutes just to um, take a look at some of those authentic resources I've collected and get a feel for how you might use them, how you might do the sorting process of different ways I can use them in my lessons. And I'm hoping that I have everybody's language covered. You'll notice I even have languages like Polish and Russian on there. Um, if you don't have something there for your language, and I do want to make sure ASL teachers know that there's a resource here for you because obviously it's not infographics, but instead would be video. And then if you teach elementary, I just have different links for you because the resources are more aimed at children. And so again, totally your choice, um, how you'd like to use those resources. And on this slide is the chart in case that's helpful to you to look at when you're thinking about the resources. Like what are the different task types I might have in a typical lesson? I'm going to give you another couple of minutes to work on that or just to practice. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to either turn on your mic or you can put it in the chat. And what this big last chunk of learning is all about how to decide how to best use authentic resources in your lessons. The one for Chinese, let me pull up my, okay. There's one called Authentic Resources, Healthy Eating. So let me see if I can put that link in there for you.
Yeah, I put the link in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Crystal's ahead of me. Questions, things you're thinking about in terms of this process I'm sharing with you. Okay, in the interest of time, of course, Crystal is the best. Okay, so I want to move on to our next segment, and that's that. Okay, so now I decided I'm using this particular resource for a speaking task. How am I building the task around it? right? So obviously, I'm not just going to say, here, speak about this, but I need to think about how I'm putting this task together. And our goal always is to maximize communication. So how can I make sure that communication is happening in one or more of the modes when students are interacting with these authentic resources? And so I have a little formula, and in your folder is a handout that has this formula that you can kind of play around, excuse me, play around with if you want to. And so do all tasks have to contain these exact things? No, but I'm giving you an idea about a way you can think about creating tasks around authentic resources. So it has three parts. First is the authentic resource itself. So think about one of the resources you tagged in that folder that you want to use as a particular purpose, right? Then in the center, what instructional strategy or routine do you want to use with it? Now, this is so that there's a process kids are using. And the process can be something as simple as turn and talk, right? But that's a strategy. You're not just saying, look at this resource, but instead, what are you going to do? So that could be something like turn and talk, think, pair, share. It could be something like inside, outside circles. It could be any strategy. The idea is you want to teach kids a process to use while they're interacting with the resource. And then on the far right, the third piece to the puzzle for me is scaffold or support. What are you giving students to scaffold or support them doing the task? And I want you to keep in mind the students who typically don't choose to do tasks. And so, how can we make sure that we give them something they can kind of lean on? And so, that's the whole point of a scaffold. So when I talk about instructional strategies, it could be a reading strategy, it could be a discussion strategy, it could be a cooperative learning strategy, it could be an interpersonal strategy. It doesn't matter. And once you teach kids these routines or processes, then when you say, okay, we're going to do a jigsaw again today, they remember what it was like to do the jigsaw because you taught it to them, right? The scaffolder support could be a graphic organizer. It could be sentence frames or sentence starters. I like blank. And so they're taking the authentic resource and then using those sentence starters to help them be able to talk or write about what they learned from the resource. It could be a list of expressions like I agree, I disagree, and my opinion, if that's the point of the task, right? And so what am I giving students? And my mantra I use is what are you adding to the table to support a student who typically would not try this task to give them the incentive to participate in the task, right? So here are some more examples of the strategies you might use, and I'm hoping that you see some things you recognize. So there's things like graffiti and four corners, and learning to find the main idea, learning to find the key details in a text, right? All kinds of different strategies that could be embedded into the task. And so let me give you some examples of how I might put a task together. So I want students to be able to describe the picture on the left. And and it's obviously girls getting ready to go to school, right? And then on the middle, I'm giving them the process, and the process is a who, what, when, where, why, right? So the five W's and a H, whatever you want to call it. And it happens to be on a graphic organizer. And so, where do you think they are? Who do you think they are? When is this happening? When is the beginning of the school year, et cetera. And then on the far right, we're going to give them what I call a picture description frame. So this is a frame that you give students and you cut out the center and then you overlay it on top of the picture. And then all around the outside of the picture are phrases they can use to talk about the picture. And that will help them also fill in their graphic organizer, right? So that package of the picture, the organizer, and the frame are all the pieces to the puzzle that I'm going to put together for this task. Here's another one. So this one is an article called Let's Celebrate the International Day of Recycling. And I'm going to have them do a process called discussion stoplight. And I'm going to have them fill in this graphic organizer, which is very similar to the last one where it says who, what, when, where, why, right? And so discussion stoplight is where there are three cards on the table. They say repeat, new idea, and add on. And they are face down. And as each student participates, they lift up a card and they have to either repeat what they heard the other person say, they have to add a new idea, or they need to add on to someone else's idea. And so, again, it's a structure they're following so that they can do the task. Oops, sorry. Okay, this is an interpersonal activity where students are going to be in inside-outside circles, and they will have interacted with a text that talks about the benefits of listening to music, how listening to music is good for your health, right? Good for your emotional health, it's good for your physical health, etc. Um, Notice on the left that there's more than one text because I chose three different texts on the topic of why music is good for your health, but they're at three different difficulty levels. And so that was that concept I showed you earlier of tiering. And then on the far right, notice that I'm giving students a chat mat to use while they're doing this task. And so this is the scaffold that I would give them. Here's a video about a grandson and a grandfather in Arabic. I'm going to use this as a guided instruction tool where I'm going to show a little bit about the video and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to do a process called Think Aloud, where I'm making the thinking I'm doing visible to the students. So in that section, I heard the word grandfather and grandmother, and so those are the people that the grandson is visiting. So I'm going to fill that in on the graphic organizer. Then I might show another little piece. And then I say out loud as the teacher. So now I'm thinking about what they're saying they're planning on doing later, right? So it's letting kids hear what should be going on in their heads when they're interacting with the text in some way. All right, and then here are three. These on the left are Instagram posts about my favorite dish, like my favorite food. And those happen to be in German. And then in the middle, they're going to do the process of think, pair, share. And then they're going to think about what are the pros and cons of eating those foods? Are they healthy? Are they not healthy? So notice that these organizers I'm suggesting are very simple. They're not super complex. You're not writing out a whole set of questions. They're just capturing ideas into the columns. And then I have a music video with the lyrics. They're going to do a um, process called nomination cards where there's different arrows and it says skip two people or go to the left or go to the right, kind of like Uno. Um, and so they turn over a card. And again, this is just giving them a new routine to do. And we want them to practice the skill of summarizing in this one. So I've given them a list of expressions that help them summarize. And so one of the things I can recommend you do is go ahead and use the handout that's in the folder and play around with designing some of these three-part tasks. Um, it's amazing how once you start doing this, it makes perfect sense and it doesn't seem as arduous. Right now, it might feel like a lot of work because you haven't thought this way before, but I'm just giving you another thinking frame for how I'm getting the most out of using authentic resources. So you'll see here, I've given you a handout. The other thing you could do as a follow-up to today is I put some scenarios in the folder. And so these are examples of how teachers have used authentic resources in their classrooms. It's all written out in English, even though it might be for a language that you're not familiar with. And then the idea is as you're reading through those scenarios, take a look at whether pieces to the formula are showing up in there. And so those are some things you could follow up with later that I've put in the folder for you. So the next question that I usually get is, so are you saying that I have to have a different authentic resource for every task I create? And the answer is no. That would drive you crazy, right? That's too much work. Think about every lesson you create might have 5 or 6 tasks. If that was true, you'd have to have 5 or 6 different authentic resources. Plus, most of us teach more than one prep. So then you would have to have 5 or 6 different resources for all the different levels that you teach. No. And so that's what we're going to talk about next is how can I stretch out? How can I get more mileage from a authentic resource? And so I use this concept of mining. So think about how they mine for gold, right? So they go in, they're like digging through, digging through, digging through, and finding the gold. So the idea here is a particular resource that I choose worthy of being used over multiple tasks? And so how do I make that decision? So for example, a meme typically has very little content on it. So it is unlikely to be a resource you would use over multiple tasks. You would have to introduce some other text because it just doesn't have enough to it, right? There's not enough content there. And so in your folder, you'll see that there's a little card that I've designed that helps you evaluate whether an authentic resource can be good over multiple tasks or in lesson sequences, as it says here on the slide. So, is it interesting to kids? Can kids make a personal connection with it? Are there cultural connections to this resource? What's the context? So, is the context real world? So, it's a real kids' school schedule. That's real. Does it have known vocabulary and new vocabulary in it? Can I do guided practice with it? Can I maybe do grammar and context with it? Are there possibilities of things kids could make as a result of, right? So some sort of presentational speaking performance or a presentational writing product. Now, do authentic resources I choose for multiple tasks have to include all of these? No, that's not the case at all. But it gives you a nice list to look at to say, I don't know, let me see if it looks like something that is good enough to use over multiple tasks. So let's take this example. This is a student schedule that I pulled off of a school website. So you see the school's website there. It is important that we're using real things. So it's not made up. This is an actual kid's schedule. And so then I start going through my criteria. So is it interesting to kids? Well, yeah, the kids all have their own schedules, right? And so they might be curious about what kids do in other countries in terms of their schedule, what they have in terms of classes. Does it have a cultural connection? Well, of course, because a school schedule is a cultural product. And there are practices revealed through the schedule. And you could even get into perspectives, right? And so definitely I can get some cultural mileage off of it. Next, does it have a context and is there vocabulary? So it has time, it has days of the week, it has names of the classes. Um, we can ask questions like, what are the pluses and minuses of this schedule? Which one would you prefer? So it's like asking them to think about, is this better? Because notice they only have partial day on Wednesday, right? And so to talk about these things, that's pretty good. Could I use it for guided practice or grammar in context, right? So I might want to practice more than, less than, better, worse. So comparative, superlative kind of things like, is this schedule better or worse? Does it have more languages in it or fewer languages in it, right? So I might want to practice comparatives when I do this in terms of guided practice and grammar and context. And what could students make as a result of interacting with this text? Well, they could prepare interview questions for the student who follows that schedule. They could rewrite the schedule using the same template and put their schedule in it and to see if there's differences, right? Here's another example. This is an infographic on 10 reasons why you should volunteer. So, volunteering is a great topic for today's youth. They're thinking about how they can give back to the community, give back to their school, etc. And so I can go through the same process with this. So I can say, is this interesting to kids or not? Can they connect with it personally? Now, I'm not suggesting that you're writing out all these things. You can do a lot of these things in your mind, but I'm just giving you some checklists around what might I consider to see if I can get more mileage off of this particular resource. And so I'm just going through the slides for you for this particular one. I can talk about feelings and emotions with this one, right? Because it has, you will feel better if you're a volunteer. You will gain happiness and positive energy, right? And so we can talk about those things. The next one, could I use it for guided practice or grammar? This happens to have all the future tense in it in Spanish, so that would be great, right? And what could they make? They could make their own infographic or video encouraging their fellow students to volunteer out there. Or this is specifically Red Cross, but it could be for anything. They could write a note to their parents asking to do volunteer work, right? So always looking for possibilities of how this can be applied. And so I don't know if we're going to have time for this one. What I was encouraging you to do on this slide is to go back to your resources that you were in earlier by theme, by language and theme, and just pulling out ones that you think could be used over multiple tasks, right? So not one that's just for warm up and that's it, but are there ones in that folder that might be able to be used over time? Okay. And then the last little part, and I think I'm doing okay with time. Okay. The last little part I have here is about designing lesson sequences around a single authentic resource. So the idea is that if I've decided that this particular resource, let's go back to the student schedule. Let's, I've decided this would be great because I can use it throughout an entire lesson, this one thing. What should I think about? So I should think about the gradual release of responsibility. If you don't know it by that name, it's possible you know it by I do, you do, we do, right? Or I do, we do, you do. And so thinking about most lessons start out where the teacher's leading something, and then we do something together, and then they might do something in pairs, and then do something by themselves. I also want to think of the communicative modes. Am I incorporating interpretive, interpersonal, presentational? Can we incorporate all the modes every day? No, so don't put that on yourself. But we're always striving to be able to have a nice balance. Scaffolds and supports. What am I giving students to support them through the individual tasks? And what kind of groupings am I using? Is it whole class? Is it small group? Is it pairs? Is it individual? And so those are basically the four big ideas I'm thinking about when I'm putting together my lessons. So let's start with just a two-step sequence. So I'm going to have kids interpret the text, and then I'm going to have them talk to a partner. So this is kind of a no-brainer because it makes sense. I learned something from something I read, viewed, or listened to, and then I am going to have them talk to their partner about it. Then we can go to a three-step sequence, and these sequences are in your folder, by the way. And this mirrors IPAs, right? So they do something interpretive, then they do something interpersonal, then they do something presentational. And so that is a very common sequence because it's the logic behind the AP exam, behind IPAs, etc. But the reality is that most of us have more than just three things we do in a period. And so now I want to talk about 4 or 5 step sequences. And so what might that look like across multiple tasks in the same lesson? And I'm using the same authentic text across these different tasks. So let's take a look at this one. So this one is for that schedule from Germany that I shared with you earlier. So I'm just going to let you have a moment. Take a look across the top of the sequence are the modes. So it goes interpretive, interpersonal, intercultural, presentational. Then across the green boxes are the groupings. So you can see those. And then the yellow boxes are the scaffolds. So what am I giving students? So you see there's a Venn diagram, there's some sentence starters they're getting there. So what scaffolds or supports am I adding into this sequence? So I'm not going to read that whole sequence to you, but I just want to let you get a feel for what I'm suggesting here. So this would be the student schedule, and we're using it across multiple modes, including intercultural, and for one lesson. So I'm not having to come up with different authentic text for each of these phases of the lesson. Let's take a look at this one. This one is, let me see. Yeah, this one is for the one on volunteering. And so you see it goes interpretive, interpersonal, interpretive and presentational. And then look at the groupings. And then the yellow boxes are the supports and scaffolds. And so again, you can see from the beginning, students are answering the question, what do you think this infographic is about before you even read it, right? Then the teacher's going to lead them through it. So that's a guided activity. And so you see, these are just stair steps kind of how you're going through the lesson. Then here's one. Oh, this one can be used with that schedule as well. But I've just put it into 5 steps. And then the reality is I can stick a warm up or do my opening routine down here on the left, which is you might start every day with what day is it? What's the date? What's tomorrow? What's the weather today, etc. And then down the end, do some kind of interactive activity or exit ticket, and that's an entire lesson plan, right? And in fact, I put the template for designing sequences in your folder. And when I've done this with teachers, often they'll say to me, oh, this actually helps me think through a lesson better than the regular lesson plan template. And so if this is something that appeals to you, you're welcome to use it. Now, can I use more than one resource? Of course you can. The idea is I wanted to show you that you can use a single one throughout, or you can use more than one. You can start out with one and then maybe insert a second one. So there is no rule here. I just wanted to show you or demonstrate for you that you could actually do one resource over multiple tasks. And so this is the sequence template that's in your folder. And this is where you can kind of plan out a sequence around one of the authentic resources that you're using or that you may have chosen from the folder that I shared with you. And then the lesson sequences are in the Google Drive folder. So you can go there and take a look at them more closely because I know I kind of did them quickly. Okay, before I get to the reflection, I do want to do a quick flyover. Okay, so let's imagine that, well, let's go back to the back to school because that's one of the ones I gave examples for. So when you go to my Pinterest board for back to school, you'll see that the resources are organized by language. So if I go to Chinese, so because I understand I have lots of Mandarin teachers today, these are all the ones I've collected so far. So you'll see there's a map of a school. There's an ad with school supplies. Here's a schedule. Here's a little cartoon. Here's kids shopping for school supplies. That's a video. So you'll see the goal is to have as many different text types as possible. I also know we have people with us who teach Spanish. So I'll share that with you, and you'll see there's Instagram posts at the top here, schedules, memes. Here's one about school supplies. There's a school map, a couple more schedules. Here's a sale ad, a cartoon. And so what I do when I try to collect these things for you is I try to collect as many different types of resources as possible so that everything isn't one kind, right? It's not all an infographic because then you can make decisions about which ones work for your students best based on their level, based on your proficiency target, etc. And then finally, I want to take you to the authentic listening, and I'm going to grab the audio lingua. And I have a whole Pinterest board of authentic listening things, but I wanted to. Are you not going to take me there? Okay. Audiolingua used to be its own thing, and now it is run by a group that has Versailles in its name, so it's French. But when you go there, you select your language. So I'm asking for it to give me information in English. Um, and so here's Chinese. So then what you can do with these resources is you can search by theme. So you can put in the word school in the target language and it will bring up um, all the audio that they have here under the topic of school. And you can either play it right on this website, right? Or you can download it and upload it somewhere like on your Google Classroom or Schoology or whatever learning management system you use. And so that's a great one. And that's the one that I shared. So let me go back and I'll grab that for you. Whoops. Okay, yeah. All right, so our final activity that I wanted to do today, let me instead go find the chat. Trying to do too many things here. Okay. Um, there it is in the chat if you want to grab the audio lingua. So what I'd like you to do is take one of the words from this slide. So we have the word share, high priority or phrases, performance, reset, shift, and change. And I want you to choose one and share some sort of takeaway that you have. So, for example, for the word share, I might say, I'm going to share these resources with my team. I'm going to change the way I'm using authentic resources, and I'm going to start using them by collecting them first and then seeing how they fit. Right? So, whatever you're thinking right now as a result of spending time with me this morning, I'd love for you to share. You can turn on your mic and share it, or you can put it in the chat. I have the chat brought up on my screen so I can see what you're putting there. What is your big takeaway? Use the template. Okay, Shufen. Anybody else? Awesome. So Anita said, I've been using them for a specific task, but hadn't thought about using them across multiple tasks. So that's great. It'll also save you some time. Re-examine my units and consider how to use the strategies. What else? Good. You're going to share or change from share to change. Oh, okay. Anybody else? Using them for an info gap test. So remember, we can adjust them. Now, that is not changing the text, so I need to make sure we say that. But instead, it's just covering it up so they have to talk to each other. That would be different from changing the words in the actual resource. And so making sure that kids know that we can do these interactively, like we can do inside outside circles, we can do um, graffiti or chat stations with these. It's not something I always have to just sit at my desk and try to figure out what it means, right? But I can use them actively in class. So thank you for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. And kudos to you for coming out on a Saturday and doing your professional learning. I think that's awesome. And I'm going to turn it back to Crystal.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's always very helpful, inspiring, informative. Yeah. And I really, uh, what helps me most is the criteria. A lot of times when I know I need to find something, if I don't have a criteria, I will get lost in 3 minutes. I forget what I'm looking for.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Any questions from the group? Please just unmute if you have any questions, please. Thank you for all the resources you shared. It's really helpful.
Welcome. So I usually take a picture of my webinar. So if you're okay turning your video on, if you'll do that now, you don't have to. But if you're okay to turn your video on, um, I'm going to do a quick screenshot. There you are. Hello. Oh my goodness, Ying has her kitty cat with her. All right, awesome. Ready? Three, two, one. Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Leslie. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're welcome.
Have a nice day. Thank you.